Well, hello, and thanks for joining us again today in this conversation that we're having with Gary and Wilma Davidson. If you're just coming new into this, you might want to go back and look at our previous sessions, which will give you the overview and also the introduction into their life and ministry in Ireland over a period of 38 years. Now, in this session, we're going to look at some of the character traits and the practices that are really, really recommended and essential in the personal life of anybody who wants to go into or is involved in ministry. And again, I'd remind you, just press the subscribe button so that you will always be made aware of when we're coming out with new videos in the series. So, Gary and Wilma, thanks for joining us again as we continue this conversation about life and ministry, especially as it pertains to how you've been involved in Ireland over a period of 38 years. When we were speaking a little bit earlier, you mentioned 6 elements of our private lives that need constant attention. For example, if we structure those thoughts, we could maybe describe them as our prayer life, um, the amount of time we spend studying and learning and preparing, our home life, how we get on with our family, with our spouse, the mentor relationships that you would have had in place, or maybe the abundance of them or the lack of them, or how you go about finding good mentors to work with. Looking at the lives and ministry of those who've gone before us, what we can learn from those and put into practice. And then I want to touch on marriage and singleness in ministry. So you put prayer at the top of the list. Why have you given that the highest priority?
Well, if he's the master and he's the one that gives direction, and he's our father, then we obviously need to maintain our relationship with him. I think it's interesting. I was really recently arrested by that term that Jesus said to his disciples. He called them. He never said anything initially about to cast out demons or heal the sick or raise the dead. He called them that they might be with him. So I think prayer is simply being with him. And for my entire walk with the Lord, which goes back nearly 60 years now, I it's the one thing I at times have wrestled with, at times have struggled with, and other times walked in tremendous victory in it. And it's such a faith walk. But I remember I was asked to speak to a group of young pastors. The term was the title was "What would a what would a young Gary ask an old Gary?" And I was offended by it, but I went ahead. And uh, and I would say, find your sweet spot and feed it. And my sweet spot is any place that I can just get alone with the Lord. Right now, in the home we're in, we've moved how many 30 something times in our married
Over
lives. So
35,
it hadn't been where we could just say,
37, 38.
yeah, this is where I'm at. Right? If I can get in my easy chair, I can get my good cup of strong Irish tea, my devotional book, and my Bible, and maybe a good podcast, sermon, and so on, and I can just feed my soul, uh, doing what Jesus said that we would be with Him, and that's where I get my. And when that's missing, then I find I struggle with patience, I struggle with anxiety,
Yeah.
and it's. How would you address that, dear?
Well, when our children were small, we sang a little song, put Jesus first, others second, put yourself at the end of the line. And for years, that was part of my prayer every morning. I found recently I've come back to it. I kind of skipped out of it, but I think, I think that's it, is we spend time with the Lord.
Yeah. And it's really because it's that prayer time, it's that quiet prayer time with God that builds relationship. Uh, And it's only if you're working out of a relationship that you can be truly effective.
Yes,
So
excellent.
that private time is
Yeah.
critical. Yeah.
And it's not just asking the Lord, it's letting Him speak to us through His Word.
Okay.
I mean, I have read through the Bible, I don't know how many times, but probably over 25
I think you have if I'm right, you have a habit of reading the Bible through every year.
every year, yes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, we
did that.
both would.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both do that.
Yeah.
So
And
we
that
need to
really
let the
helps
Lord,
your time with God because
Yes.
you're
It
reading
does.
His
the
Word.
Lord, we
Yeah.
let the Lord speak to us as well. And recently, here I am, 77 years old, and I'm memorizing scriptures I
Okay.
quoted yesterday. I didn't know I could do that at this age, and now I'm saying, why in the world didn't I do this when I was younger?
Yeah.
Because it's such a blessing to be able to, in prayer,
Yeah.
even scriptures come back to you and pray them back to the Lord.
And I think, Joe, that individual by their own makeup and personality, different places feed their soul in different ways. For instance, my son is an avid outdoorsman and a hunter, and I remember him going through a time where he was having to he'd stepped away from ministry because of a difficulty, and but he was having to work 6 days a week and so on, and he wasn't getting any time away. And I remember saying to his wife, I said, he needs to go and spend some time, several hours, probably in a deer stand in the woods. And God would just speak to him there. So different places speak to us because we're different personalities.
So there's no formula for this.
No, I don't think there's a formula.
The key thing is giving God time.
That's right.
Speaking to God in prayer,
Yes.
reading His Word, but there's no set structure for it. It's whatever works for you.
Well,
But
for
the key
some
thing is the
families,
time.
like I grew up in a family where every night before we went to bed, we knelt
Yes.
either by the bed or the sofa or somewhere, and we prayed every night before we went to bed. So
Yes.
I grew up with that.
Yeah.
Prayer is a part of every day.
And then that was a legacy that your family left with you that became part of you.
Yes.
So there's power
We
in
struggled
that.
with it. He didn't grow up like that, so we
Yes.
kind of struggled with having that in our home.
Okay.
But I'm so blessed. Our youngest daughter, her family, they do that every night, and
Okay. Yeah.
it
That's
blesses the soul heart.
that's really, really good. Your second point, which is about studying, was it reminds me of Paul's instruction to Timothy to study to show yourself being able to correctly handle the Word of God. Um, how important to you in your life and ministry was regular study? And I'd say going beyond the study that we would normally do, like you can prepare for a sermon, you can sit down and get your reference books, do whatever it is you need, and online now there's a huge amount of tools. But how widely should a minister read outside of just preparing for a sermon? How widely? I think you really enjoy books.
Oh yeah,
How
love.
important was that?
We both do.
Well, I think both of us, it was essential. In fact, in my early years, any extra funds we had would end up going to books. And I remember Wilma saying to me one time, well, spend all our extra income on books. She wasn't really complaining. She was just making a statement. And I said, well, some men into brunettes, some are into blondes. I'm into books. And she said, stay with the books. So there's something I can remember even, as a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy, I had a little shelf in my room and I had books on it. I always had a great love for books. And I do believe this. I believe in 5 years, we will be the books we've read and the relationships we have. And we all have those books that really ministered to us. I mean, I remember going back, A.W. Tozer and even Ravenhill and E.M. Bounds really ministered to me. Years on, others, Maxwell, different ones. Eugene Peterson became a really favorite of mine. And I don't know how many of his books I've bought and give away. And it was kind of my love language. And with our young pastors coming up, I knew they had limited income like I had as a young pastor, so I would always had a stash of books in the back of my car to give away. And but I can read a book, even I can read a biography, and it might not be about a missionary or a pastor. It may be the life of an individual that has achieved a great deal. But just reading their story, the discipline in their lives stirs that gift up inside me, right?
Yeah, so something in you responds to
Yeah,
the great achievements,
yes,
or the great teachings, or
that's
great
right.
sermons, but it could be it's wide.
Yeah.
So I know, for instance, that, and I mean, I've spoken to people in ministry who really don't read a lot, and they said to me, "Look, Joe, I just hate reading. I just can't do it. I can do all sorts of other things." You must have met quite a broad spectrum of people over the years, some who were really into reading, some who struggle with it. Um, were there any tips and techniques that you would give to people who maybe struggled with reading?
I would have said you've got to read. I mean, if you're going to expand your own abilities and so on, and be challenged by others, you've got to read. And so you just have to sit yourself down. And I've talked to young men that said, who sit themselves down and discipline yourself to read. But if you struggle reading, then get it on tape or get it on audio. I work with, yeah, we work with several uh, pastors that have severe dyslexia. So it's very difficult, but they listen to every podcast they can find. So there's so many tools out there to help us. And I also think individuals like that, they're probably very strong in other areas where I was probably weak and had to really shore it up. And, but I remember this, some pastor said to me once, you read yourself full, you pray yourself hot, and you preach yourself dry.
That's a lovely
Yeah.
expression. But I suppose, in summary, there's a sense that there's such a depth of, when you think of all of the great men and women of
Oh,
God who've
yes.
gone before us, and the relationships they've had with God, and the things they've achieved. We were talking just briefly about Ben Tipton,
Oh,
who was
yes.
a
Yes.
great minister in Africa, I think, mainly, and one of your mentors, I think.
Yes.
Um, and the things he saw people rise from the dead. He
Yes.
saw great miracles taking place. Even if we were able to read his story, but the story of others as well,
Yes.
it broadens our thinking. It gives us a sense of a bigger picture of what's possible and what God does in other places, and makes us more expectant. Is that a fair summary of the value of?
I think so. I think also I've noticed this. Uh, I'm not given a great deal to prophecy, but at times God will use me in it in the word of knowledge, word of wisdom. We're appreciative of that. But I find when I get around some of our friends, good friends of ours like Barry White and others that really use prophetically, I find it stirs up that gift in me. You do
Okay,
too.
yes.
Yeah, and I find myself suddenly speaking in meetings and so on, and feeling a prophetic word for somebody, a word of knowledge. So all of that stirs up that gift. So if a guy is, if a ministry has been very successful in financial provision, I read about them, it stirs that up because the Holy Spirit is a person. He comes in, the full person comes in with all of his gifts and his fruit. And so that gift is there, so it begins to stir up.
I am reading Susie Spurgeon's story.
Okay.
Somebody's written her story. And this was one of her passions, was getting books to pastors who couldn't afford them back how long ago?
18, yeah, be the 1850s, 60s, yes.
150 years ago. And I said to Gary the other day, she made a remark about Charles Spurgeon would say, if you see a bird out in the field or if you see a mouse hiding, a minister should see if he can make an illustration out of it.
Oh, right. Yes.
Everything that he saw.
Yes.
And Gary said, yeah, That's why I still read his books
Okay.
150 years
Isn't that
later,
incredible?
because
It
he still
is.
reads his sermons,
Yes.
not his
Stuff that
books.
lasts for a long time. The other thing just to mention maybe that affects the personal life of people in ministry is let's talk about home life for a few minutes. I've met a lot of people in ministry who have a very good and strong home life. And I think one of the things I've noticed, it provides them with a very strong emotional foundation out of which to minister. So we have this relationship with God where, through prayer, through reading His Word, through spending time with Him, that gives us a firm foundation. But our emotional needs are often met in our home life,
Yes, absolutely essential.
and that is really helpful in ministry. How important is that, in your opinion, on the life of a minister? And how does a strong or weak home life affect somebody's ministry? Um, and if you keep that question, and then you might also comment on practices, things we can do to strengthen our home life, to make sure it remains strong.
You know, I've just celebrated my 80th birthday, and all these things have been on Facebook, and I've got these cards and videos and so on, and I'll talk about what a great, uh, the great work that's went on in Ireland and all of this. But I absolutely know that I couldn't have done it without this girl beside me. And she's still a girl, even though anyway.
She's nearly 26 now,
Yeah,
77, I don't mind.
yeah. So, and no matter how much pressure, and we had to learn this, and I think it's important to say this, Wilma, because we had to learn this early on in our ministry that if I came home, Wilma could read me and see, well, the dishwasher's on the blink, or the washing machine, it wouldn't been a dishwasher for a long time, was on the blink and so on. But she could see in my face, I didn't need any more pressure, and could just, for want of a better term, suck it up and wait. Now, there had to be that time that I was available to her, but absolutely, our home was always a place, an oasis, a place of peace, place of sustenance, place of great love. And so when I got home, what?
And affection.
And affection, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, affection's a big part of it. And yeah, I mean, and so when I got home, I could leave all of the problems at church behind.
But this was the thing, as a young pastor's wife, that I learned from reading.
Right.
And studying. I had a study course, and this lady, she said this: you don't have to tell him as soon as he walks in the door that the washer broke today.
Right.
You can tell when he comes in, he needs a bit of quiet and space. That can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
And also, if it's a difficulty, somebody called and said, they have a huge problem. You don't have to tell him tonight. He's going to fret about it all night. Wait till in the morning when he's rested.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I learned to do that, and I'm so thankful. And that was part, you say how important reading and studying from other people, you learn.
Yeah. And I think one of the principles that you're mentioning there, which if I can take it and just change it a little bit, because I know very often now that husbands and wives might both be working, and might both have busy lives, and might both be coming home from a difficult or stressful day. But what you're talking about there is the principle of creating space. Creating space for the person who comes home, that they're not from either side, whether it be husband or wife. Like I know men and women married together who are both involved in ministry, active ministry. They minister separately, but they come home every evening. And I think what I'm picking up from you is learn to give the other person space. Give them a place for their home as a place of safety and relaxation. That it's not a place that they immediately going to be met with another half a dozen problems or whatever. We can get through the problems. We can work through them. We can talk through them. But creating that space and that place of safety and rest is paramount.
And yet, saying that, it's so important that you're able to be open with each other and
Yes.
share. We often talk about how important it is to have pillow talk.
Yes.
just that time was just the two of you. You go to bed and you're just able to talk through. A woman especially needs that.
Right.
What is it they say? How many words does a woman have?
I think it's 50,000 and a man has 200 or something like that.
It could be. I thought it was 100. But anyway,
but often he needs to talk about things that have happened during the
Yes.
day and at the office and that,
Yes.
and just to have time to.
and we learned, and we talked about it last night, that that I, as a man and leader, when I would talk through something, I was through.
Okay.
And so this
this is
put a little
interesting.
tension that we didn't realize.
At one point in our lives, we did. We had had somebody working in the office, and I picked up on it that he was. I would hear things through conversation. Well, you didn't share that with me.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I talked it out with Judy.
Yeah.
And so we had to become aware then. I became the priority. He talked it out with me first.
So that's just for clarity here, because we did talk about this a little bit earlier, and just for anybody watching, what we're talking about here is, let's say I'm working in an office and I have somebody working with me, so I can talk through issues with them. We're not saying there's no hint of impropriety here.
No,
This is just
no,
normal.
not at all.
This is just normal relationships
Yeah,
where you're
it's
working
just-
with colleagues. But the thing is that if you process everything with your colleagues, you've nothing to talk about
Yes.
That's right.
later. And the person you're going home to may feel left out of it.
Yes.
So
That happened to us.
so not only do we have to make space for people, but we have to include them.
Yes.
We have to include, this is,
When God said it wasn't good for man to be alone,
yes,
he needed a helpmate, and that's all part of it. All of this, it's emotional. That's why
yeah.
marriage and a healthy marriage is such a beautiful thing.
You addressed something there that that I think we forget. We were blessed that I had a good income,
Yes.
so Wilma didn't have to work outside the home. In today's environment, it's very different, especially especially as it relates to Ireland, but also in America.
Well, housing
Especially in
costs
Ireland.
alone sometimes necessitate.
And they both have
Yeah.
to work.
Yes.
And so that's that throws another issue up, and that they're both in ministry together. They're both leading. I think of several of our couples in Ireland. They're both leading. They're very strong. Both of them, great ministry as a couple, and they're both going. And there has to be, they need a calendar, and they need to have, or on their iPhone, whatever, that time and that break. And it leads us to the importance of Sabbath. And Sabbath can be difficult when you're both working 5 days a week. You got 2 or 3 small children going to school. Saturday is what? Trying to get everything done around the house, but get ready for Sunday. And so it's a necessity. And I know years ago, I began to do a senior lead retreat, and we covered nearly all the expense just so I could get couples to come off for a weekend or for even an overnight, and deliberately didn't do back-to-back meetings because we need relationships. I mean, in Paul's life, it's interesting in 2 Timothy when Paul talks about, and we know he is facing execution, and he writes to Timothy, and he emphasizes relationships. So at the end of a man's life, the only thing that was important really was his relationships, and he's talking about them. So we have to invest in relationships for the long term, and that begins with a person that's most intimate and close to us.
And I think one of the mistakes that we can make, and I would say we do it for worthy reasons, is we say the work of God. I'm not saying it doesn't come first. That the work of God comes first, above and beyond everything, and that we need to invest in that, and couples commit into that. But actually, that's not a lot. That's not a good recipe for success.
No,
God comes first.
God first, family second, and ministry third.
And ministry third.
Yeah, that's something that halfway through our ministry, we started saying that. We didn't say that at the beginning.
Yeah, I remember working with a ministry, and we had this discussion, and they were actually teaching God, ministry, and I said, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Now, I am the first one to confess that there's times that it's been God, ministry, family. There's been other times it's been ministry, God, and family. It's kind of like, well, God, you call me to do this, I'll go ahead and do it for you. But kept trying to come back to that, repent, confess it, and I remember saying to him, we can't work together if this is it. And they insisted, no, this is what we do. And I saw marriage after marriage not make it.
It's really sad.
Yeah, and because I years maybe getting ahead here a bit, but years ago, I talked with a godly man that had really challenged me for missions when I was only like 22. And I remember I heard him speak, and I actually laid on the floor for an hour weeping. I was so broken for the needs of the world. But I remember when he got older, I was with him, and I said, called his name, and I said, so what are you going to do when you retire? He said, I'm not going to retire, because when you retire, you're a nobody. And something in my spirit said, I'm not going to be a nobody. I'm going to have relationships.
Yes.
So here I am, still able to do this, but I think people say to me that relationships has always been my priority and a gift. But if we don't have relationships, what do we have?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you come to the end of your life. What is it they say? Who's going to be around your deathbed? Well, it's not going to be your office.
Well, I keep coming back, and it seems to be my personal pet focus these days is that the two great commandments that Jesus gave, that we love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. We love our neighbor as ourselves.
Yeah.
And if Jesus was able to sum up the law and the prophets and everything in those two commandments, it's clear to me that everything's about relationship,
Right.
relationship with God and relationship with each other.
Yes.
And actually, when we think about it, the work of ministry is to bring people into relationship with God and with each other. What could be more important? What could be more beautiful, in fact? So yeah, let's spend lots of time building relationship and focusing on it. And our home life and ministry, or no, sorry, our home lives are critical in those.
Those outside relationships flow out of our home.
Okay, well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about mentoring. Now, I have a scripture in mind in Paul's second letter to Timothy, in chapter 2. He says, um, just to paraphrase it, that the things that Timothy has heard from him, that he should commit these to other faithful people who can pass them on and so forth. So it's this whole idea of learning, of Timothy learning from Paul, and then passing on to others, and the role of mentoring in the life of a minister. That isn't always easy to do. It isn't always easy to find people. Um, how do you look for mentors? How did it work for you? And what advice would you give to other people in trying to find mentors they could work with?
I was in my early few months in the Lord. I was mentored by a godly man, James Mabry. I actually gave the eulogy at his service here several years ago, and this man, he mentored me for 4 years, and I didn't realize it because he came to our home, inviting us to come to his church, and he came about every 6 weeks for over 4 years. We never went to his church, and yet the night that a friend manipulated me into going to church and everything. My brother spoke about it the other day. When Gary came to the Lord, he came home, and the trajectory of our whole family changed forever. And but when I went to the Lord, guess where I went to church? I went to his church, and so he was actually mentoring me because I think I loved pastoring and still love it, still very involved in it. But he mentored me as a pastor, and I never thought about it just recently. Even though I didn't even go to his church, but at a distance, I watched him. And I know as a young boy on the street corner in our small community with a bunch of young guys talking, he was the one guy that when he walked by, we all quit telling dirty jokes. But there was another minister in our community that when he walked by, he joined in. So, and we loved it, but we didn't respect him. Yeah, we didn't go to his church. So we mentor that way. Uh, and when I began to pastor, a lot of the fellas around me, good men, very classical, and their approach very Pentecostal, quite legalistic. And I just thought there's more. So I had to find mine somewhere else. And so I got mentored. I remember a statement by Fred Smith, who was a great Bible teacher, a lay person who was a great Bible teacher and had a large company. And I remember he wrote an article called Mentor by the Prince of Preachers, and it was Spurgeon. And I remember thinking, he couldn't have known Spurgeon. Looked it up. He was born 40 years after Spurgeon died. So we can have mentors and reading after these men of God, we've talked about already, challenge this. The other thing is, I pursued some individuals, and I've had it in my own life, in Ireland especially. A lot of young men just pursued me, and I was looking at my text messages, and several went on and on how much I meant to them. But I also know they're trying to keep me in the circle with them, which I respect, and that I'll be there. But I talked about Jamie Cochran, wanted to spend time with me, so he realized how busy I was. So he calls me one day and said, "What are you doing Tuesday?" And I said, "Well, I've got to go to Cork." And he said, "What time are you leaving?" I thought, my goodness, the boy's nosy. I said, "I'm leaving at 8," but I knew him. He said, "I'll be there at 7:30." He didn't even ask me. He said, "I'll drive you." So all the way there, I'm mentoring. All the way back, I'm mentoring. He had taken a small church. We'd got finance for him for a few years. And so he had a lot of time. So in those early years, every spare minute, and I remember another man that he spent time with, he said, "All that guy does is ask questions." I said, "I love it." Oh, he said, "I told him the other day to be quiet." I never told him to be quiet. He was asking questions. He was pulling stuff out of me. And now we get together, and sometimes he's mentoring me, you know. And I go in and I speak to his staff and pray with his staff and so on. So he pursued me.
I think that's a lovely illustration, and I kind of what I love about it is that we can take responsibility for ourselves being mentored,
That's right.
and we can also sow into the lives of others as well. But I love that idea of him coming picking you up,
Yeah.
imposing himself on you on that journey. I'm sure you would have had a nice journey, a nice piece, quite probably listen to podcasts or listen to something on the way down.
Yes.
But the fact that you use that time, were able to use that time really well to mentor him, that's tremendous. That's really, really good.
I tried to never really take a journey alone if possible. And that was having guys along, having them drive. I remember Desi Curtis was driving, and I had a new car, and he hadn't driven nothing but an old banger. And so he's bombing down. I'm mentoring him. We're talking, and I look over and he's running 90 to 100 in the motorway. And I said, "Hey, Des, yeah, I mean, he's into it. We're talking and he's into it. I mean, and I
They
said,
never had cruise. He's
yeah,
not cruising to cruise.
I don't think he'd ever had a car with all that power. And I said, "Hey, Des, I really love you, but if you get a ticket, you're paying." He said, "Oh my goodness." But that was what was happening, wasn't it? We were mentoring and challenging each other, uh, and I hope I die doing that.
And then the other thing for me that goes with mentoring, or it comes to my mind anyway, that they're not exactly the same, but there's mentoring and there's accountability. Um, and I'm thinking particularly about accountability at a really private, personal level. Like I know we're all accountable. We've got boards of elders, we've got people in authority who are observing, and we're interacting with them all the time. We're accountable. But when it comes to our personal lives, is there a value in finding somebody that you can be accountable to? How did that work for you? Or what advice would you give to other people in that?
I think it's essential. I mean, you've got to have somebody that I think probably now you got to have somebody that says, "Hey, Gary, can I see your phone?"
Okay. Yeah.
So that's accountability.
Yeah.
And I know in the early years, I did a teach on the whole area of temptation, and I remember making it, and I actually did a video that I'd seen on a secular movie, but it's brilliant. It was just a play where the lady was trying to seduce him, and in the movie, it was Munich, and in the movie, the guy he'd been away from home for months. He suddenly runs from the lady, much like Joseph, leaving Potiphar's wife, goes to his phone, calls his wife, and starts talking to her. And she's expecting their second child, and he's weeping because this was totally secular, but and then he comes out and realizes his friend had been seduced and lost his life. But I remember using that in a teaching, and my goodness, when it was finished, everybody just sat there. But it was so much in it. First of all, obviously the enemy was against him, but second, he ran home. He ran to his wife, and and when he heard her voice, there was no sense of temptation. And then he saw the value of running. But I remember I said, there was a group of young men and women. I said, if you struggle, I'm the national leader, and obviously have some jurisdiction over your credentialing and so on. If you struggle and it's found out, it's totally different from when you coming. I can be your superintendent, national leader, or I can be your pastor. But if you're struggling and you come to me, we're going to walk through this. And I'll never get an individual started hanging back. And I thought, yeah, we've all been there. I know what's happening. He said, I got to talk. And just admitting that he was struggling, pouring on computer, he started to weep, and then he was free because he had accountability, because he knew I was going to walk up and say, Joe,
And and very often it's the fact that these things are hidden
that's right.
that captures you, isn't it? Once something comes out into the open, as you just said,
Yeah.
freedom comes. It not always an easy thing to do,
No.
but that accountability relationship is critical.
Yeah.
I must say I had a great accountability relationship with a good friend of mine, Andrew McNeil, for many, many years.
Yes.
And we knew each other really, really well, and talked about, there was nothing we couldn't talk about. It was an incredible support, but it
Yes.
also kept me straight.
Especially when you were going through a difficult time yourself.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
That's right.
We had this with our first mentoring group out of 2 Timothy 2:2, that I would go up to you and I would say, Joe, how are you doing? Well, we know in Ireland everybody's grand,
Yes.
right? And you'd smile and say, I'm grand. I'd say, but how are you really doing? And when we said that,
yeah,
you had to be
you have
honest.
to be honest. Yeah,
And I think that kept all of us
yeah.
quite free.
There was a
because-
lovely set of questions that Andrew came up with when we were going through this, and he had a set of questions he'd asked me. You know, are you reading anything you should be reading? Or there was a list of 10
Yeah.
questions, and you sort of go through them all. And at the end, the last question was, "Have you just lied to me?"
No, that's a great one, isn't it? But there has to be that personal accountability.
Yes.
Because recently we had to deal with a situation with a minister, and trying to work him through it. He had moved him out of ministry, everything, worked with his family, counseling, whatever. And he made this statement. He said, well, whenever I come through all this, I'll be able to teach about accountability. And the pastor was working with him, said, oh, that's good. And he said, I hung up and I went to eat. I said, realized, no, that's wrong. I called him. I said, you were accountable. You were accountable, but you didn't follow through.
Yes.
So there's that aspect of personal accountability. I've got to be honest.
And I think, look, the temptations out there are great, but I think the thing to remember is there's a greater prize here. There's a bigger prize than the immediacy of this temptation, or of this, what might be deemed to be a gratification of some sort or other, whatever that might be. And there's a bigger prize.
Yes.
And to keep our eyes on the bigger prize with the help of those who will help keep us accountable. I'm sure, if you had married somebody handsome, I'm quite sure that he would have had terrible problems with keeping young ladies away from him. But you probably never had that sort of problem, Gary. Uh, I am jesting, of
Yeah,
course,
I know you
because
are.
yeah.
But you
But
know,
how did you protect your own
protect myself.
integrity? Yeah.
Well, first of all, we remember we went to a seminar teaching on marriage retreat, whatever, on the whole area of temptation, overcoming, and so on. And I remember there was this statement, and it was said, if you get Thanksgiving dinner at home, a hamburger will never keep you happy. So I think the importance of even your own intimacy in your own life and your own commitment to one another. And but I remember and my best friend and I one day, there'd been several, we'd heard several failures, and it scares you because you think that's a godly man. If he failed, what about me? And so I remember my good friend of mine talked, and I said, "Okay, we've known each other. We dated together. We've known each other since we were 3 or 4 years old. Has anybody ever come on to you really strong? And between us, and at that time we were probably in our 50s. One time, both of us,
Right.
and I realized that many times it's because individuals give off those vibes that they are open. But he had a very good relationship with his wife. I had a very good relationship with my wife, and I think there was a real security in that. The other thing is, I heard Dr. Richard Dobbins teaching on temptation in a mission orientation that we used to do every 4 years, and he said, if you're ever tempted, he said, your credentials will not keep you from falling. The fact you get caught out will not keep you from falling. Think about going to your baby daughter and saying, I broke covenant with your mother. And our Dana was 2 years old. And I started weeping because I thought I could tell Wilma, but I think I would take my own life where I'd go to that baby girl, look her in the eye, and said, I broke covenant with your mother. Our marriage is through. Because she was so sensitive. And so and I hadn't thought about that in years, but it's a good input for here because whoever's out there listening and watching this, if you're tempted, think of what it's like to go to your baby daughter or your baby sister and say, I failed.
Yeah. That will wake you up pretty quickly. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Wilma, I know that it's only men that ever get tempted. Women never do.
Thank God I haven't.
Well, I, you're an amazing woman. But do you want to comment on my terrible, inaccurate statement? But do you want to comment on that and talk to some women about areas of temptation that they can get pulled into?
I can't identify with it because I can't imagine it,
Yes.
but
Yes.
but I know it does happen, and wow, I think the things that we have talked about is keep your marriage strong, keep your love
Yes.
life strong.
Yes.
Uh,
Keep your marriage hot.
we had somebody very, very close to us in our family that was unfaithful to her husband, and I just couldn't believe it. And we were praying about it. Somebody was praying with Gary, and he said, I see arrows of deception.
Right.
So, you can be deceived.
Yes.
And it's later, I heard her husband say, I never heard her pray out loud one time ever in our marriage of over 20 years.
Okay.
And I thought, oh,
Yeah.
was there really a secure relationship with the Lord?
Yeah.
That had she really kept her prayer time, and if not, then it was easy for a gap to be there for an arrow of deception to come in.
But there are things like, and we're not turning this into a marriage counseling session, but it's just to be aware of things like, um, men are often attracted by what they see, and I think the creation of emotional bonds on a woman's part can lead to
A failure.
a failure. So it's to watch out for these things. Men have to watch out for what they're watching, who they're speaking to, who they're looking after, who they're accountable to. Women need to be looking at who am I getting emotionally connected with, which may seem like a lovely thing to do, like with a friend or something like that. But if there's an emotional bond connecting that's inappropriate,
That's the reason why those pillow talks are so important.
yes,
You're so emotionally bonded
yes.
that you're not going to look to somebody else to share or look for emotional.
Now, this is something that I think is really key, and I think we need to be aware of is the giving part of this. So, for instance, both men and women have needs, and they are very often different needs, and they're expressed differently. And I'm no psychologist, by the way, I'm not trying to be, but I'm aware of these things. So, it's the giving, it's when we decide to give to our partner. That has to be a crucial part of keeping our marriages healthy. Like, if I decide to pull back from giving to my partner and saying, well, they're not giving to me, I'm going to pull back now and not give to them, uh, that's a road to ruination. But if somehow, if we can have this selfless love that we say, I'm going to keep giving no matter what, even though I may not feel like it from time to time, I will keep giving and I will keep blessing and I will keep nurturing and I will keep loving. Um, if both parties can do that, even through difficult times, that's going to make it a bit easier, isn't
You
it?
have a strong marriage.
Yeah.
And it's not always 100%, 100%.
Yes.
Sometimes I can't give 100%.
Yes.
Sometimes women can't give 100%. So that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Whenever you can't give, I can, and vice versa.
Yes.
And
But the goal is for both to give 100%.
yes,
Yeah. And then to be gracious towards your partner when they can't.
Yes.
and always
Little
remember,
things. I mean, when you get married, just a thank you
Yes.
and now it's so easy to get a text message. I love it. I get text message several times a day, and he calls me when he's on his way home. And
sometimes I will send PG-13
Right.
text messages, and
or
sometimes
emails.
Okay.
yeah, and in fact, Wilma had been gone for several weeks, or if I had one of us, and so I remember sending her this email, and there was you could have warmed your hands on it, so to say, okay, and when I sent it,
It went to the
couldn't get
wrong
it back,
person.
Yeah.
and it went to
office.
You sent it to
whoever
the wrong person, did
it
you?
went. Yes.
Oh dear.
And so I remember I was, I I thought, I'm grabbing the computer. I shut the computer down like, well, it's already gone,
Yeah.
So I just sent this note. I said, I have no idea who you are. I've never seen you. But you obviously just received an email that was not meant for your eyes.
Yes.
But at least there's one old missionary that still has got a lot of heat in his marriage, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I think I said something like, there may be snow on the roof, but there's still a fire in the chimney. And I get this note back, who I still don't know who it was, and they said, thank you. It has went anonymously all over the third floor, but your name is not there, and you should hear the laughter. Well, on your third floor is the AGWM floor.
Okay.
So I sent a note back. Well, it's about time you bunch laughed up there anyway.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, how embarrassing that must have been at the
Yeah.
time. You can't pull emails back.
No, you
It
can't.
Be
just
very
made-
careful when you're sending a saucy email to your spouse
Yeah,
that
that's
you
right,
that you
that's
got
right.
the recipient name right.
he sends me a text message like that. I delete it immediately because I don't want my grandchildren finding or to look at photos.
Oh well, but isn't it lovely that that's still going on after
Yeah,
200 years of marriage?
Oh, we love each other.
yeah.
Yeah, you're married 30. No, how many years are you married now?
In 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, it'll be 59 years.
59 years.
59 years.
Incredible, amazing, and
We're so
God has
thankful.
blessed you during all that time.
Yes.
Over the years, Gary, you've used the phrase "standing on the shoulders of giants." Um, and I'm increasingly aware of the heritage that we have uh, from the lives of those who've ministered and gone before us, people who've sown into God's kingdom, people who've committed their lives, that we stand on the work that they've done. Um, who are some of the past ministers and leaders and writers who have affected you most, who've affected your thinking and your walk with God as well?
Well, obviously, there's a group of pastors. My first pastor, James Mabry, great influence on my life, and did till he went to the Lord. But he still influences my life, obviously. And there were several other pastors like that really influenced my life and mentored me through their lives. I think both of our mothers, in ways, influenced and mentored our lives. They're both faithful. Neither one of them ever complained. We left them as widows to take their children, including my mother's youngest, at the time, youngest granddaughter, that they were devoted to each other. And watching how faithful they were through it, they never complained. Although Wilma's mother would sometimes say, after a few years, there's people in America need saved. So,
Yeah, she'd say, why can't you go to the East Coast?
Oh, right.
It wouldn't be so far
Instead
away
of heading over to Europe, yeah,
instead of going
yeah,
to
so
Ireland. Yeah.
I often say, and I remember saying this one time speaking, and Caleb was just a boy, and our son Mark, who's in ministry. And I said, Mark stands on my shoulders, and Caleb stands on his shoulders. And there's that time when we want to shout up and say, Caleb, what you're seeing? Because he's going to see Father, because he stands on his dad's shoulders and mine. And in the place he is right now, I got a beautiful note from him just today, and 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 he has some things in the Lord I see that probably I never had. Now I didn't have the legacy. I had a very good father, great mother of faith, and I knew I was always loved and so on, but wasn't a man that was a devoted follower of Christ. Followed the Lord, but not devoted, and so my son has had that, and his son has it. So we stood on each other's shoulders, but uh, Eugene Peterson, I brought up Richard Foster, the great Quaker writer, Spiritual Formation, R.T. Kendall. It just goes on and on. And at different times in my life, different individuals have mentored me. I was mentored by the director of Eurasia Teen Challenge on leadership, Howard Foltz, who's with the Lord now. The first pastor leader I ever met was Howard. And that was it. After I came to Ireland, 1980 and 81, he mentored me on leadership. I knew how to pastor, had good pastors to mentor me, but he mentored me on leadership. The individuals like yourself that are very good at administration, my old brother, great gift of administration and governance, mentored me even by the way you walk before the Lord. And then, of course, didn't we have the Noel McFarlands in our life?
yes, yeah.
And the
An
God in
elder's
Him.
elder, I think we
Yes,
would have
elder's
referred to him
elder.
as yeah,
I cried all the way up the aisle following his coffin
yeah,
because I thought he's such a great loss. And these quiet individuals
yeah,
mentored us.
yeah.
And so, yeah, we stand on the shoulders of those that have went before. And by the grace of God, we have a real legacy to pass on.
And I think part of it is I would have seen myself as a well, rather than try to describe myself, but I more impetuous, and I'm less impetuous now. Maybe I was more aggressive in my younger years, and I'm uh, hopefully a bit calmer and more gracious now. I don't know, others to judge, but I think one of the things that there's a temptation to think when you're starting off in ministry or whatever that you can make this happen. You know what to happen. You know what to do. But actually, we're better off if we look to those who've gone before us, learn from them, stand on their shoulders, and take a more humble approach
Yes,
to our own capability
yes,
sometimes. And through that act of standing on the shoulders of others and the other mentoring things we spoke about earlier, we can actually broaden our ability to have an impact
yes.
ourselves. one of the things we spoke about in when we were talking about home life is the blessing and the strength of a good marriage and how to keep that strong. But we're all conscious that not everybody in ministry is married.
Mm,
So, and uh, marriage or lack of marriage is not a sign of success or failure in something. That's just who people are. Some people get married, some people don't. Will you talk to us a little bit about, expand on that for and give us some examples of some of the great people and some of the people you know who've been called into ministry who are both single and married? The key thing I want to get out here is that marriage is not the only way
that's right.
to develop as a minister. It's a great way if you can, or if that's where you are, but not everybody's called into a life in marriage.
Well, I think we've all known individuals who have known individuals who had the gift of celibacy
Yes.
and very comfortable. And what I said to one of my grandchildren recently, I said, there's worse things than being single. That's being married to the wrong person. And the marriage, and we've all seen individuals whose ministry was curtailed, and it wasn't by one of the spouses that just didn't have the heart for it, and we've seen failures as a result of it. We've seen marriage break up because of the result of it. But I think of probably one of the finest individuals we all three know is Dennis Thrasher.
Yes.
And Dennis was single. Dennis got married when he was 20. A few months later, he realized his marriage probably should have got annulled, was not going to work. It was difficulty, deception. And at that time, if you were divorced, you couldn't be a credentialed minister in most evangelical groups, including the Assemblies of God. So whenever after the divorce, he went ahead and pursued ministry. They informed him that if he ever remarried, even though he was the innocent party,
Yeah.
thankfully we dealt with that in Ireland when we set up the organization there. He said the first couple of years, one of the worst years of my life, but God, I fell in love with Jesus in such a way I didn't need anybody else.
Yes.
And then we saw the result of his ministry because he made 29 trips to Ireland.
Yes.
In those early years, I would leave him there when I come to the States to get some funds in to survive another few months. And he said, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be the pastor or the referee, but there was such a mutual respect for him.
Yes.
But if he would have married, he would have never done that. And he would
Yes.
say that. And when I talk to him now, his mind's slipping a little bit. He said, you're like family. And somebody said the other day, all he does is sit on the back porch of his house, drink Irish tea, and talk about the Ireland.
Right.
So, but uh, singleness was forced on him,
Yes.
but he responded instead of getting bitter and mean. I don't think any of us know a kinder,
Oh,
gentler, holier person.
and people love him. I would say that we probably wouldn't describe Dennis as one of the coolest people around. Would that be fair?
Right?
He was uncool, I think, to put it. Man of God, but not cool. But he had kids running after him, youth. Everybody loved him.
Yes, everybody.
Of all ages, everybody loved him, and he could speak and minister to people of all ages, and they actually did think he was cool.
He has
He,
a pure heart,
he
and
had,
it came out.
he did. He was an
Good
amazing
prayer
guy.
life. He had anointing. I remember he was down ministering in Waterford, and he came in. I said, "How'd it go?" "Oh, well, we had 5 or 6 saved, and including a man that was 90 years old, and prayed for him. He was baptized in the Spirit. Several baptized in the Spirit." So I went on and listened to his sermon, and I thought I can give an altar call that well, and I did, and I think Wilma raised her hand. It was no, but it was anointing
Yeah,
because he was in love with Jesus,
yeah.
and then we have the Sarah Taylor who ministered so effectively in Ireland for many years, served as well. She has her doctorate now, and a great communicator. Would have liked to have been married, I think, in the early years. Wasn't. She's actually she served her father as executive pastor, did a great job. The church didn't feel for her to follow through. As pastor, it was, we all look at it and know it was what God wanted. She's planting a church as a single person. So I think, and then John R. Stott in the Anglican movement, who actually said, I had the gift of celibacy, and he lived to be in his 90s. He said, well, the rest of you go home and take care of your wife and children. I'm writing new books.
So,
So, there's a give and
yeah.
take in it. Yeah,
And I think it's worthy to recognize that God calls single and married people to
that's right.
ministry. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening to us in this session. We're going to continue in our next session, looking a little bit more deeper and considering how to recognize the call of God, and how to figure that out as how it applies to our lives, how to hear Him, how to recognize that voice, and how to have that authenticated by other people as well. So remember, please do subscribe, and we'll see you in the next session. God bless you.